For 4 months, Iran did not kill a single American service member. Not during the naval blockade, not through the collapse of the ceasefire, not through 7 consecutive nights of United States airstrikes on Iranian territory. 4 months of absorbing punishment without drawing American blood? Then, on the night of July 17th, ballistic missiles and drones struck a United States airbase inside Jordan. 2 American service members were killed. A third is missing. Central Command confirmed it the following day. Here is what I want you to sit with. Retaliation would have come in March. It didn't. What happened on Friday was not a reflex. It was a decision, made deliberately, after months of restraint, by a leadership that has been rebuilt almost entirely since this war began. That makes it a message. And in the next half hour, I'm going to show you exactly who it was addressed to, why it was sent now, and what it tells us about where this war goes next. Let's start with the facts, and only the facts, because a lot of what's circulating right now is not. On Friday, July 17th, Iranian forces launched a combined ballistic missile and drone attack against United States positions in Jordan. United States Central Command, CENTCOM, the command responsible for American military operations across the Middle East, confirmed on Saturday that 2 American service members were killed in action while CENTCOM and partner forces defended against the attack. 1 service member is listed as missing in action. 4 more Americans were medically evacuated to hospitals in Jordan. All 4 have since been discharged. Other personnel were treated for minor injuries and returned to duty. A United States official confirmed the location as Muwafaq Salti Air Base. The location was first reported by the Wall Street Journal. CENTCOM's own statement did not specify where in Jordan the attack occurred. The identities of the 2 service members killed are being withheld until 24 hours after their families have been notified. That's standard procedure, and I'd ask you to respect it in the comments. Now, the response. At 6 o'clock Eastern on Saturday evening, at President Trump's direction, United States forces launched a new round of airstrikes against Iran. Those strikes ended at 11:30 that night. CENTCOM said the strikes had 2 purposes: to further degrade Iran's ability to threaten commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz and to swiftly punish the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps forces who launched the attack in Jordan. That was the 8th consecutive night of American strikes on Iran since ceasefire talks broke down. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the sacrifice of the 2 service members only stiffens American resolve. 2 more numbers, and then we'll get to what it means. These deaths were the 15th and 16th among American service members in this war. And they were the first American military fatalities from Iranian fire since March. That second number is the entire story. Everything else in this video is built on it. So let's establish why 4 months of silence matters. Because if you don't understand the gap, you can't read the message. Go back to the opening weeks of this war. On March 1st, 1 day after the war began, 6 United States Army Reserve soldiers were killed by a direct Iranian strike on a makeshift operations center at Kuwait's Shuaibah port. Days later, an Army sergeant died of injuries sustained in an attack in Saudi Arabia. On March 12th, 6 more service members were killed when an Air Force KC-135 refueling aircraft went down in western Iraq. That crash was not attributed to hostile fire, and I want to be precise about that, because the distinction matters for the argument I'm making. In the first 40 days of this war, by one count, at least 13 American personnel were killed and 381 wounded. And then it stopped? From roughly mid-March until Friday night, Iran did not kill an American service member. 4 months. Through the naval blockade of Iranian ports, through the ceasefire negotiations, through the collapse of those negotiations, through a week of intensifying American airstrikes. Now, I want to be careful here, because there are at least 3 explanations for that gap, and I don't think anyone outside Tehran can tell you with certainty which one is right. Explanation 1. Capability. Operation Epic Fury, the American codename for joint operations with Israel, which ran from February 28th to May 5th. was a sustained campaign against Iranian military infrastructure and leadership. It's entirely plausible Iran simply couldn't reach American forces effectively for months, and has now reconstituted enough capacity to try. Explanation 2. Restraint. Iran may have deliberately calibrated its attacks to avoid American deaths, targeting infrastructure, shipping, and allied facilities instead, keeping pressure on without handing Washington the political justification for a much larger war. Explanation 3. Negotiation. For much of that period there were talks. Direct, indirect, and through Qatari and Pakistani mediation, killing Americans mid-negotiation would have ended them. Here's why I lean toward the second and third over the first. Because in that same 4-month window, Iran demonstrated it could hit plenty of things. It attacked commercial shipping repeatedly. It struck Gulf states. Just this past week, Iranian drones hit a power generation and water desalination plant in Kuwait and injured Kuwaiti land forces personnel. That's not an incapable adversary. That's an adversary choosing targets. And if you accept that Iran was choosing, that it could have killed Americans and didn't, then Friday night isn't an escalation that happened to Iran. It's an escalation Iran chose. To understand the choice, you need the shape of this war. If you followed it closely, this section will be review, but the timeline is the argument. So stay with me. February 28th. The United States and Israel launched joint airstrikes on Iran, targeting military and government sites. The opening salvo killed Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader for nearly 37 years, along with a large number of senior officials and military commanders. President Trump later said 48 senior Iranian leaders were killed in the bombings. Understand the scale of that? Not a strike on infrastructure, not a strike on a nuclear site. The decapitation of a state's leadership in a single night. The strikes came during ongoing negotiations between Iran and the United States over Iran's nuclear program. Iran's response was immediate and enormous. Hundreds of missiles and thousands of drones aimed at Israel, at American bases across the region, and at Gulf states aligned with Washington. Oil infrastructure was hit. Shipping was hit. March 1st, with airstrikes ongoing and the Assembly of Experts unable to convene, a Provisional Leadership Council took over under Iran's constitution. President Masoud Pezeshkian, Chief Justice Gholam Hossein Mohsenieh, and Ali Reza Arafi of the Guardian Council. March 8th, Iranian state television announced that the Assembly of Experts had chosen Mojtaba Khamenei, the 56-year-old son of the man killed 8 days earlier, as supreme leader. Political leaders, the Revolutionary Guard, and the armed forces backed him quickly. There is a detail here that most coverage skipped, and it's remarkable. In 2024, when the Assembly of Experts met to discuss succession, Ali Khamenei reportedly said his own son should be excluded from consideration. 2 years later, with his father dead and the country under attack, Mojtaba got the job anyway. By an account from Iran International, under pressure from the Revolutionary Guard. He is described as more hardline and more conservative than his father. President Trump expressed disappointment at the selection. So consider what the leadership in Tehran actually looks like today. A supreme leader who has held the post for 4 months, in wartime, whose own father didn't want him to have it. A senior command that has been rebuilt after devastating losses. An institution, the Revolutionary Guard, that pushed hard for the succession and has enormous influence over the man it installed. That is not a leadership with the luxury of looking weak. Meanwhile, the Strait of Hormuz, shipping through the strait, a choke point that in peacetime carried roughly a fifth of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas, has been largely blocked since the war began. The Revolutionary Guard forbade passage, boarded and attacked merchant ships, and laid sea mines. The International Energy Agency called it the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Brent crude surged past $120 a barrel. Qatar Energy declared force majeure on its exports. From April 13th to May 29th, The United States blockaded Iranian ports in response. May 5th, Operation Epic Fury formally concluded. And then, for a moment, it looked like it might actually end. June 17th, the United States and Iran signed a memorandum of understanding. Iranian President Pezeshkian was photographed in Tehran, displaying the document. An agreement aimed at ending the war and opening negotiations on something broader. The terms, cease fighting, lift the American naval blockade, open the Strait of Hormuz, and critically, commercial ships would transit the strait free of charge for 60 days. Hold on to that 60-day clause. We'll come back to it, and it explains more than anything else in this story. The rhetoric around the signing is worth tracking because it moved fast. On June 17th, the day he signed, Trump said it would be, his words, a little bit unfair for Iran not to have ballistic missiles if other countries in the region had them. The next day, he called the Iranians smart and described the deal as an unconditional surrender. 21 days later, it was dead. July 6th and 7th, Iranian forces fired on 3 commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. July 7th, the United States escalated strikes against Iranian assets. Trump said he considered the truce over. July 8th, at the NATO summit in Ankara, hosted by President Erdogan, Trump made it official. He said the ceasefire was over. He called Iranian leaders sick people and scum and liars. He said dealing with them was a waste of time. He did not rule out talks continuing. He noted that Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner wanted to keep negotiating, but he floated reinstating the naval blockade, launching more strikes, and taking over Karg Island, Iran's main oil export terminal. Markets reacted within hours. Brent crude jumped 6% to nearly $79. July 12th. The Revolutionary Guard declared the Strait of Hormuz closed, citing American interference. July 16th. The Revolutionary Guard's own news outlet released footage of a missile launching toward American targets in Jordan, Kuwait, and Bahrain. July 17th. Muwafaq Salti Air Base, 2 Americans dead. Notice the sequence. Iran announced its intentions publicly on state-affiliated media the day before. This was not a covert operation. It was telegraphed. Which brings us to the question this whole video is built around. Most coverage of this war frames Iran's Hormuz strategy as a blockade. Close the strait, choke the world, force a deal. I think that framing is wrong, and getting it right changes how you read Friday night. Iran does not appear to be trying to close the Strait of Hormuz permanently. It appears to be trying to own it. Since the Memorandum of Understanding, Iran has repeatedly threatened and attacked ships in the strait, not to stop traffic, but to force vessels onto routes and protocols set by Tehran. It has warned ships to use pre-approved corridors. It has fired on those that didn't. And Iran's ambassador to China has said openly that ships transiting the strait will be charged fees with what he described as special considerations for friendly countries. That is not a siege. That is a customs regime. Iran is attempting to convert a temporary military capability, the ability to threaten shipping in a narrow waterway, into a permanent economic institution, a revenue stream, a source of leverage over every economy that depends on Gulf energy applied selectively forever. Now go back to that 60-day clause. The Memorandum of Understanding guaranteed free transit for 60 days from June 17th. That window closes in the middle of August. Nobody has publicly clarified what happens the day after, which means Iran is currently negotiating with missiles over the terms of a toll system that begins in roughly 4 weeks. And this is where the strike on Jordan starts to make sense as strategy rather than rage. One more piece, because it explains why Iran has more room to maneuver than you'd think. The conventional expectation was that closing Hormuz would send oil to $150, $200 a barrel. It didn't. Analysts at Societe Generale noted the contradiction. The 1973 embargo removed about 7% of global supply, and oil rose 134%. This war has affected roughly 14% of global supply. Double the loss, with nothing like double the price. Their explanation was China, which they described as the invisible hand rebalancing the market. Chinese crude imports fell 41% in June, to the lowest monthly volume since October 2016. Beijing cut something in the order of 3 million barrels a day of demand, close to Japan's entire consumption. By drawing down enormous strategic reserves, switching to coal, and slowing its refineries. American Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called China an unreliable global partner over its hoarding of supply and export limits. Here's why that matters for Friday night. The economic weapon Iran expected to be decisive has been partially neutralized. Not by Washington, but by Beijing's stockpiling. If your oil leverage isn't producing the pressure you expected, and your toll regime is 4 weeks from a cliff, and you've absorbed a week of airstrikes without answering, what's left? So, what did Iran actually communicate on Friday night? I'd argue 3 things, and I want to be clear that this is my reading of public actions, not inside information. Nobody outside the Iranian command knows their intent. Judge the argument on whether the evidence supports it. Message 1. We will not be bombed back to the table. Iran absorbed 7 consecutive nights of American strikes, including strikes on 6 bridges in Hormuzgan province near Bandar Abbas, which Iranian state media said killed 8 people and injured 20. It did not fold. It answered by killing Americans for the first time in 4 months. Whatever the airstrike campaign was designed to produce, it did not produce capitulation. That's a data point Washington now has to price in. Message 2. We will raise the cost to your partners, not just to you. Look at the target set from the Revolutionary Guard's own footage. Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain. 3 American partners, not the American homeland. Not a direct confrontation with the United States Navy. That's a strategy aimed at the coalition rather than the superpower. Every Gulf state weighing whether hosting American forces is worth becoming a target is the actual audience. Message 3. We can still reach you. Ballistic missiles and drones got through to a defended airbase after months of degradation strikes. Whatever Operation Epic Fury destroyed, it did not destroy that. And there's a 4th possibility: I'd be dishonest not to raise. It may not have been a message at all. Militaries make mistakes. A strike intended to hit infrastructure can kill people. A commander can act without full authorization. And in a command structure rebuilt under wartime pressure, with a supreme leader 4 months into the job, the chain of authority is genuinely uncertain to outside observers. I lean toward deliberate, for the reasons I've laid out. The 4-month gap, the telegraphed footage, the timing against the August deadline. But I could be wrong, and anyone telling you they know for certain is selling you something. 4 things to watch, and then I'll let you go. 1. The missing service member. As of recording, 1 American remains missing in action. That status will change, and how it changes will shape American public reaction more than anything else in this story. 2. The blockade. Trump publicly floated reinstating the naval blockade of Iranian ports and taking Karg Island. Karg is Iran's primary oil export terminal. Analysts have said that if Karg were damaged, Brent could reach $120 a barrel, with some forecasting far higher. That is the single most consequential escalation available, and it is on the table by the president's own statement. 3. Congress. Republican Senator John Curtis of Utah has been exploring whether Congress should formally vote on military action in Iran. With the ceasefire dead and Americans dying again, that pressure grows. Republican Representative Blake Moore has called the strikes a justified response. 4. The politics. The midterm elections are under 4 months away. Gas is just under $4 a gallon nationally. The World Bank has cut its 2026 global growth forecast to 2.5%, the lowest since the pandemic. Meanwhile, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has arrived in Washington for talks with President Trump on Tuesday. The Memorandum of Understanding was supposed to end the fighting in Lebanon. It hasn't. Clashes between Israeli forces and Hezbollah continue. And the State Department has issued a worldwide caution warning Americans that United States diplomatic facilities have been targeted outside the Middle East and that groups supportive of Iran may strike American interests anywhere. 4 months of silence ended on Friday night. The question now isn't whether Iran sent a message, it's whether anyone in Washington reads it the way Tehran intended. And what happens in mid-August, when the free transit clock runs out and both sides have to decide what the Strait of Hormuz costs? I'll cover that when it happens. Jordan strike. Casualties. Muwafaq Salti. First fatalities from Iranian fire since March. 15th and 16th U.S. deaths. 8th straight night. Strike purpose. Hegseth's statement. March 1st Kuwait deaths. Saudi Sergeant. KC-135. 13 killed / 381 wounded in first 40 days. War start. Epic fury dates. Khamenei killed. 48 senior leaders killed. Interim council. Motaba succession. Father excluded him in 2024. IEA, largest supply disruption. No U-terms. 60-day free transit. Unconditional surrender. Ankara remarks. Brent, 6% to $79. Hormuz fees. Special considerations. Sachin, 1,973 comparison. China's invisible hand. China imports Sir Pete's and Besant unreliable partner. Bandar Abbas bridges. 8 killed. Karg Island / $120 forecast. Curtis Moore. World Bank 2.5%. March polling. Aoun visit. Worldwide caution. Gas price.